joining us. This is Sheriff Warren from Gloucester. I'm the current president of the Sheriff's Association. I don't know if John has joined us yet this morning. Does anybody see him up?
No, I've been looking for him. I see Susan. I don't know if Susan can tell us if he's going to come on or not.
All right, I'm here.
There he is.
I'm here, and we are ready to go.
Perfect.
All right, sir. Good morning.
Sheriff,
thank you for joining
Sheriff
us.
Warren, thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Just want to jump right in this. I can't speak for all of us, but I'm sure that most, if not all, share these same feelings. When I started my law enforcement career a few decades ago, all I really wanted to do was chase bad guys and run up and down the road, and didn't really concern myself with politics and whatever the General Assembly was proposing. But now more than ever, though, the questions you're answering this morning affects all 9,000 plus members of the Virginia Sheriff's Association and our families. So we really appreciate you taking the time this morning to speak with us. And before we get started, I just have one small request. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Just tell us the truth. Fair enough?
I can't see all the screens.
Absolutely, sir. That's the way I live my life. And I just appreciate that as the standard for all of us.
Okay.
All right, sir. So just going right off the sheet, as governor, will you veto any bill that reduces qualified immunity protections to Virginia law enforcement officers that are currently in effect?
So the short answer is yes, I will veto any bill that limits, impacts, or tries to restrict qualified immunity. I also want to add just a moment, if I can, sir, which is one, how honored I am to be with this group. And second of all, how much I appreciate all that you do. I've had a chance over the course of this campaign to meet so many of you personally. And those of you that I have not had a chance to meet personally, I'm sorry. But I look to meeting you personally. I have an enormous appreciation for the pressures that all of you are under. I also have an enormous sense of gratitude for what you all do in order to keep Virginians safe. And I also have an amazing appreciation for the priorities you all place on how you do what you do, which is absolutely put citizens of Virginia first and foremost, even ahead of your own interests. And so when it comes to qualified immunity, you can rest assured that I will absolutely stand up to make sure that qualified immunity is not at all restricted, is at all damaged, is at all removed from protecting you all from what it's supposed to do. I find the whole suggestion that my opponent, Terry McAuliffe, has made, that he in fact believes Virginia must increase police accountability, and therefore he will end policies like qualified immunity. That is a quote from my opponent. And I will tell you, I don't believe that he understands what qualified immunity is, and I certainly don't believe he stands up for law enforcement. And so I'll go back to where I started. I will protect qualified immunity for all law enforcement, full stop.
All right. Thank you, sir, for your answer and your additional comments. As governor, will you provide state-funded salary increases to sheriff's deputies to attain a state-funded starting salary level of $42,000 with corresponding raises to all deputies and non-sworn staff members?
Again, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we need to find a way to get there. And let me just expand on this a bit. I believe that right now, with the surplus that's available to Virginia, we should enact a $5,000 state bonus in order to Virginia. That bonus could be paid out over 3 years in chunks. But we should absolutely do something right now in order to retain the very qualified and experienced deputies that we have across Virginia. But on top of that, we have to move to increase salaries. I will tell you, is $42,000 the exact right number? I want to work with all of you to make sure that we have the right number and how we get there. I do believe that all jurisdictions need to find a way to chip in to help, but it's got to be led by the state. And so you can count on me to go to work to increase compensation so that this is not just a moment where all of you put your life on the line every day, but you also don't have to have the just ridiculous financial sacrifice that deputies are having to make in order to serve Virginians. So we're going to go to work to get salaries up. We're going to go to work to make sure that people are compensated appropriately. And you can count on me for that. And this is one of the things that I think is, by the way, as I've heard from so many deputies, this is not the first thing they raise with me. It's not the first thing they raise with me. And therefore, it reflects the heart of all of you, that while your personal interest is to get compensation up, first things I hear from people are, we must protect qualified immunity. We must, in fact, repair our mental health system. We must be able to preemptively or preventatively police. These are the things that I hear over and over again, and then it's compensation. So while you hear from me very, very clearly, I will work in order to get compensation up, and we will get it to the right level so that we can retain people and compensate people fairly. And I will work with you to $42,000 is the right number. Let's get there. But I also wanted to know that I so appreciate the heart of all of the men and women that serve across Virginia that in fact aren't focused right out of the box on their own personal interests, but are most focused on making sure that they have not just protective legal framework around qualified immunity, but they're able to better operate in a broken mental health system, that they're able to preemptive police and proactively police as opposed to reactively police, and that they can have all the tools and equipment they need to protect Virginians. So again, sorry for the elaboration on the answer, but I think it's important. We need to get salaries up. We will work to do that because we must. And I look forward to working with this association in order to get that done.
All right, thank you for that.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir. Sheriff Draper.
yes, can I add a little bit to that question?
Sure.
Glenn, I'm sheriff in Martinsville.
Hello, sir.
How do? City sheriff, not law enforcement. In your view, is a deputy sheriff, whether they're a court deputy, a jail deputy, or civil process deputy, as well as law enforcement?
Yes, sir, they are. And I think that when we're talking about salaries that are too low for people to, in fact, even raise their family, we have to raise salaries for all deputies.
Okay, thank you. And I just the jail is a stressful place to work, and a lot of times they get overlooked. A lot of times, as I've said many times, I started in the jail, and I know that a lot of times officers on the street, they wrestle with these people, they get them in jail, and guess who has to put up with them for the eternity after that? It's the jail officers. And they're in jail 12 hours a day along with the inmates. So it's a lot of times they're forgotten, and a lot of times we just hear that there's not enough funding to fund the jail officers and the road officers. But I hope that you would treat them all the same.
Thank you for that comment. So if you heard my answer, yes, I think we have to bring up salaries equally for all of them, for all deputies. I do think we also must, in fact, utilize resources that should exist in counties as well. So this is going to need to be a cooperative effort. And I know that every county has different resource capabilities. But we're going to go to work in order to lead on this topic in order to bring salaries up for everyone.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And you touched briefly on the mental health crisis that we're in the middle of. So it kind of leads us into the next question, which is, as governor, will you provide funding to sheriff's office to implement the Marcus alert system?
We have to, because what's happened right now is we've actually have a Marcus alert system that has been introduced, and we haven't provided any funding that's appropriate for it. So again, this is, in my view, another way to, unfortunately, stretch already stretched budgets. And so we actually have to provide funding in order to support the Marcus alert law.
Okay, thank you. As governor, will you restore any reduction to funding to law enforcement that may pass the General Assembly, including but not limited to reductions to fundings for school resource officers, patrol officers, jail officers, or court services officers and sheriff's officers?
Again, the short answer is yes. I'm committed to making sure that funds are not reduced. To be clear, any bill that comes to my desk that tries to reduce funding for law enforcement will get vetoed, and we will not allow that to happen. We already have a absolute crime chaos going on across Virginia with a 20-year high in murder rate. And the idea that we're going to reduce funding in order to address that, in my mind, is absolutely out of bounds wrong. And so not only will I work to increase funding for law enforcement, but any bill that comes across my desk to reduce it, I'll veto.
All right. Thank you for that. And I think we're seeing some of the ramifications of that around the country. As governor, will you veto any bill that includes oversight of an elected sheriff by an appointed civilian review board?
Yes, I will. Again, an elected sheriff is an elected sheriff, and therefore voters have the ultimate decision as to who in fact serves in these positions. So what we will always do is respect the ability of voters to elect their constitutional officers, and there's no anything in between the voters and the sheriff. So yes, sir, I would veto that bill.
All right, thank you. As governor, will you veto any bill that provides collective bargaining for sheriff's offices?
Yes, sir. As you know, I am a strong proponent for maintaining right to work in all respects in Virginia, and I have a deep respect for unions. This is not an anti-union moment, but I will not sign a bill that advocates or enables collective bargaining.
Thank you. As governor, will you fund the law enforcement standard of one deputy sheriff per 1,500 population as described in Title 15.2-1609.1 of the Code of Virginia?
Yes. And I think, when you couple together the fact that not all these positions are funded with the incremental demands that are placed on all deputies by our broken mental health system, we have an absolute staffing challenge. Not to mention the fact I know all of you are struggling to keep your great men and women. And so, yes, I'll work with all of you to fill vacancies and ensure that law enforcement is fully staffed and fully funded.
As governor, will you veto any bill that reduces the current mandatory minimum penalty for assault of a law enforcement officer?
Yes. And there's not much more to say about this other than absolutely.
All right, thank you. As governor, will you veto any bill that reduces the current penalty for murder of a law enforcement officer?
Yes. Again, we must support penalties. We must support the current framework to protect our law enforcement heroes. And any violent crime against our law enforcement heroes and any violent criminal must be held accountable. So the short answer again, sir, is yes.
All right, thank you. As governor, will you address the mental health crisis by funding initiatives to provide services to those in need, reducing the drain on law enforcement during the emergency custody order and temporary detention order process? Please describe what you will do to address this.
Yes, well, first, the answer is we must address this. And we are currently looking at a variety of solutions to ensure that we, in fact, are doing this in a comprehensive manner. As we were discussing, I think there have been, if not a complete moment of almost ignoring this problem and not addressing it. And as a result, we see hospitals that are no longer, 5 hospitals that are no longer accepting patients. We see a shortage of beds. We see a shortage of staffing. And we have to have a comprehensive solution to this. We have transportation challenges where in many cases, as we all know, your men and women are having to come basically off duty or out of the line of duty for up to 72 hours in cases. So we must have a transformational moment here in our mental health system in order to not only address the challenges that we've just discussed, but also to serve to serve those that are suffering from mental health issues. So you will begin to see from me recommendations and strong demands for funding to go to these areas now, out of our surpluses and out of the money that has been allocated to Virginia from the federal government. So again, I'll go back and say, yes, we must address our mental health challenges. We must address the processes that are in place in order to make sure that the emergency custody orders and the temporary orders are in fact managed in a way that it does not further deplete the resources that we all have protecting Virginians across this great Commonwealth.
All right, thank you. In 2010, the General Assembly reduced jail per diem payment from $8 per day to $4 per day. This has never been restored. Will you commit to restore the state funding to local jails to $8 per day per diem?
So the answer here is one where I need help from all of you. I will absolutely commit to have my Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security and the Secretary of Finance to work restore to pre-2010 levels. We need to work through and understand exactly the total amount of funding that's going to be required, and then to make sure that we can get it into the budgets. So hear from me that I'm committed to work on that topic. I need help from all of you to understand exactly the financial impact so that we can in fact put it in. I do also want to make sure that I support the mandatory transfer for all fully sentenced and state responsible inmates from local jails to the State Department of Corrections. I think these issues are all caught up together, and we need comprehensively to address them. So I'm going to need some help from this organization and from all of your leadership to make sure that we get this right.
I appreciate your candor of that question. I think it's a tough one to answer without having all the facts. It's a mighty big ask.
It is, and I understand the ask, and that's why I think together we can work towards what are the main issues we have to address, and let's get to addressing them. And I think this group is well prepared to help me there.
All right, sir, that wraps up the questions that we had on the survey. And if you have a couple minutes, I'd like to open it up for any questions from anybody else on. Do you have a few minutes?
I do have a few minutes, and I look forward to doing that, because very rarely do I get a chance to listen to all the leaders on this call. So I'm more than happy to do two things. One, if there's a particular question, but I also would love to hear from you on issues that we haven't talked about that are really important. As I've held roundtables and opportunities to sit down with law enforcement leaders, there's a lot of issues at hand. And so if anybody has anything addition that we missed in this conversation that you absolutely think needs to be on the table, let's do it.
Well, be careful what you ask for. So at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up if anybody has any questions of Glenn.
Hey, Glenn, Mike Chapman here. Good to hear from you. Hey, I just wanted to.
Sheriff, great to speak with you.
Yeah, hey, I just want to ask you something here, because you did mention in one of your answers here proactive policing, and I think that there's a real problem if you look at the crime going up, not just here nationally and all that. The restrictions that have been put on us have really hampered our ability to do our job. You start talking about making constitutional law enforcement issues social issues and not focusing on crime. We can't stop cars anymore for equipment violations. If that had been the case after the Oklahoma City bombing, Timothy McVeigh would have never been identified as the bomber there, because it was a tag hanging by chicken wire that led the troopers to pull him over. There's this effort to do everything in this legislation's power to keep us from doing our job, and that prevents us from having any proactive or preventive measures. And a lot of the things that were going on before, when you're talking about being able to search cars because of marijuana, because of all these things, and the guns that we would uncover, the other crimes that we'd be able to determine out of that, have made it extremely difficult for us to be proactive in our job. And now we've become a reactive law enforcement. Anybody that's got, in most these sheriffs who are full service that have the responsibility of enforcing the laws. And, you know, you mentioned that, you know, our focus here is public safety, and that really has been the #1 focus, even before salaries and benefits and all that, and what you had mentioned earlier. I just wonder if there's anything that you can do to help us to restore some of these things that we can do to make us effective in our job, because when we can't pull people over, we can't do our job, we can't be proactive, it's only going to continue to increase crime. It's just extremely difficult for us to do our job right now. And I'm glad you weighed in on the assault issue as well. It's like school's out on law enforcement. So if not only do we have a problem being proactive, but if we try to do anything, the school's out. I mean, these folks say, hey, the worst they can do is get a misdemeanor charge for taking a swing at us. And I think that that's horrible too. So any comments you could give on what you can do to help us out in our jobs to be a little bit more proactive, I'd appreciate.
Well, first of all, Sheriff Chapman, thank you for the good question, and thank you for your leadership. As I mentioned, I think what I have clearly heard from so many of you and folks in police departments and the VSP is that we have in fact started to prevent our ability to be proactive. And so I would look for this group and others to come together and work through what legislative agenda might we press forward with to establish our ability to proactively police. And we understand that many of the bills that have become law, in fact, have impeded that ability. I think we should go back and revisit. And I think having a comprehensive review of that and then pressing forward the legislation that in fact allows us to again proactively police, that we need to do that. And that's where I'd look for help again from this group. This is about us coming up with answers. This is about us then moving forward into action. And then this is all about us making Virginia safe again. And so I'm going to need some help from all of you on what we want that agenda to look like. But I am committed to work with you in order to make that happen. I do believe that we're gonna end up with a Republican majority in our House of Delegates. We will still have to work with the Democrat-controlled Senate. But I actually think common sense legislation will in fact get passed, and I will be able to sign it. So I look forward to working with this group in order to in fact package that and move forward with it.
Thank you. One last thing on the mental health. I know that's a real problem for us, and this cross systems mapping has it projected out years ahead where we're going to have supposedly a lot more mental health help, and what you're seeing is actually a reduction in that, and it all falls back on our shoulders. So I think it's actually worse now than it's ever been, and I think it's not only the help that we need with regards to what we do out there, but it's going to require a lot of staffing on mental health if they're going to be the primary on all these calls. One of the things I think they forget about mental health professionals is, or the public that thinks that you can send anybody out on these calls, is that there is an element of danger in many of these calls. Not most of them, but many of them. And I think it's important that we address that. But I think a lot of that's going to be funding and assistance that you're going to need to try to design to help towards mental health itself, so that the burden on us becomes less rather than more. That's all I have. Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Thank you for those good comments.
Anyone else have any questions for Glenn while we've got his time?
If I might, Sheriff.
Go ahead, Major.
Major Heatley here, Glenn, with Tazewell County Sheriff's Office. I'm the chief deputy. I was kind of waiting for Hank to jump in. I thought Hank might jump in because he's been very outspoken, but I'm going to go ahead and ask your opinion and what you would be willing to do to help us. These two-step TDOs are absolutely killing us. And the process of us spending 48 hours or more in some cases sitting with people awaiting a bed in some mental facility, what can you do? How would you propose we get this TDO process corrected so that it doesn't affect our deputies the way it is right now and our budgets?
Yeah. So Major, thank you for that question. And when we had a chance a few weeks back to sit down in a roundtable with a number of sheriffs and majors and department leaders, and oh, by the way, Commonwealth attorneys as well. This issue was just absolutely critical to try to address. I heard lots of good suggestions to address it, and I think we've just got to do a little bit of everything. Honestly, I think we've got to increase capacity at all of our mental health hospitals. We have to actually have capacity. By the way, is not just beds, as I said a moment ago. It's actually staffing so that the beds that are there can in fact be utilized. On top of that, there's I think great ideas around having actually outsourced transportation capabilities, so that it doesn't fall upon the deputies to in fact provide all the transportation. And then finally, that we have to have a maximum amount of time in order to make the transfers happen. These were all very good ideas that were in fact aired as we worked through this topic. And as I said, I think it's an all of the above approach, because there's no silver bullet here. We actually have a major failure in our mental health system that we have to address, and we can see it cascading or dominoing across the system of not just mental health but law enforcement. And so, sir, I look forward again to working with this group and continuing to find those ideas that we can then press forward with in order to make sure that the valuable time that so many of law enforcement officials are having to dedicate to the TDO process, in fact, is far less burdensome, so they can do the jobs that they all need to do and that Virginians need them to do, which is to keep us safe.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Major. Well, gentlemen and ladies, I want to thank everybody. I apologize that we're not able to spend actually a half a day together, or even more, and I look forward to doing that. Again, I want to conclude with a little bit of where I started. I am getting to meet many of you, and again, I am sorry for not having met all of you personally and being able to thank you, but also thank the men and women that work with you and for you. We have got a major both opportunity but risk in front of us. The opportunity is to actually press forward with funding law enforcement appropriately, to press forward with protecting qualified immunity, to press forward with actually reinventing mental health in Virginia, and to press forward with a cultural change that actually starts with standing up for law enforcement, so that in fact you get the benefit of the doubt. This is where we have to go, and it's in front of us. I do particularly worry about my opponent's inability to recognize that we have in fact have a major crime problem in Virginia today, that we have a 20-year high in murder rate. But I'm reminded that when he was in fact governor, the murder rate went up 43% and the rape rate went up every year. I was incredibly disappointed that he failed to even engage with the Police Benevolent Association. But I knew that in his heart, he could not support any of the things that we were talking about today that would absolutely move the safety of Virginians forward, as opposed to continue to put not just Virginians at risk, but all the men and women that work for you. And so I'm committed to this. This is actually one of the major reasons why I'm running for governor. It's because I think we must keep Virginia safe. So I look forward to working with this group. I look forward to working with all of you individually and collectively on moving forward an agenda that will fundamentally reposition law enforcement in Virginia. And so thank you for your time this morning. I know you all have amazing demands on it. And so for us to gather up like this just speaks volumes for how important all these issues are to you. And I particularly want to thank your leadership, and Sheriff Warren and John Jones, thank you both for your leadership, and I look forward to speaking with you all again, and I am just a phone call away.
Sounds great, Glenn. We greatly appreciate your time again, and obviously these topics are not going away for us. They're super important to all of us and our families, like I said in the beginning. So again, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule. Appreciate it.
Sheriff-
Thank
Sheriff
you.
Warren.
Thank you. And if we could, real quick, I'd love to.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Could we close this meeting with a quick prayer?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to stop and just say thank you. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this great Commonwealth and this great country, but I particularly want to thank you for these stand up every day for all Virginians. Father, we ask for your protection around them, encourage them, to strengthen them, to keep them safe, and most importantly, so that we can do your will. We pray all this in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you all very much. Have a blessed day.
Sheriff Warren,
Yes,
time for one quick question.
sure.
It's actually for John. John, I was just curious, is Glenn knows where I stand with him. I'm just wondering if his opponent is going to share this time with us.
We sent the survey to both campaigns. We've asked for a return on the survey by August the 1st. And this is the response that I've gotten from Glenn's campaign. I've not gotten a response yet from the other campaign, from Terry McCullough's campaign. But again, the deadline's not quite here. We've got a few days left. So I hope we'll get something back.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for jumping on this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Sheriff.
President.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome, and thank everyone for joining in. We appreciate it very much. Very successful.
Thank you, John.
All right, John, have a good one.